Hello, I'm Neil Humphreys, author and journalist in Singapore, and welcome to a brand new podcast series called Steward Leadership, Maximum Purpose, Maximum Profit. The idea of this podcast series is to give listeners fresh ideas and perspectives to hopefully allow all of us to enable profit with purpose. And I learned that phrase from the man sitting opposite me when he came onto my radio show, a term that we all know about, but basically, how do we make sustainability sustainable? Luckily, this idea comes from the Stewardship Asia Centre's latest book, Sustainable Sustainability, written by its CEO right here, Rajeev Peshawaria, who is with us today. Rajeev, you came up with this podcast series. It's your idea, Steward Leadership, Maximum Purpose, Maximum Profit. What does it mean? And what do you hope to achieve?
The reason behind this podcast that we want to talk to people that we call steward leaders, people who see themselves as stewards of planet Earth and humanity, and are addressing today's existential challenges in the natural way. Now, what do I mean by natural way? What's happening in the world? Why are we not making progress on climate change? We're going towards 2.8 degrees instead of 1.5 degrees. Inequality is increasing, not decreasing, and cyber threats are on the rise. So despite all the high decibel points, money, regulation, why are we not succeeding in reversing these challenges? Because we're doing it the unnatural way. We're asking people not to consume less. It's against human nature to consume less. Try telling somebody in a developing country that, I've saved up money to buy my parents a car and I won't do that. Right? We're asking businesses to make less money, make less profit in order to do more purpose. That's again against human nature. The only thing, as Tom Friedman says, the only thing that is bigger than Mother Nature is Father Greed. Yeah. So we have to work with Father Greed in order to solve for today's. Hence, we have to have profitable solutions to environmental and social challenges. And there's plenty of good examples, and that's what we want to highlight in this series.
Brilliant. And we've got one of the best examples to kick this podcast series off. I am joined today by Dr. Kiran Bedi, a formidable social activist and political leader that needs no introduction, but I'm going to try, and I must stress this is only some of the highlights. Born in India, you were an Asian tennis champion. You became the first woman to join the officer ranks of the Indian Police Service. You were also the Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry, a city in India. I'm not done. You were instrumental in introducing groundbreaking prison reform that I really want to talk about later. And for all of this work and so much more, you were conferred the Ramon Magsaysay Award, often known as the Asia Nobel Prize. Still not done. Somehow, you found time to set up the India Vision Foundation, which has served to help the underprivileged in the rural and urban communities, particularly in the prisons, for the last 30 years. So my first question is, Kiran, how did you find the time to do this podcast? That's my question to you to kick things off.
I've been invited for Steward Asia Center. I've been invited by Rajeev. Rajeev, as you know, is the CEO of the Steward Asia Center. And they invited me. They have the summit. They have the Steward Leadership Summit. I've been invited as a speaker. So I'm going to be speaking there tomorrow. So being invited as a speaker, I think this came as a bonus. This podcast with Rajeev is a bonus.
Wonderful. Well, let's talk about those issues. Rajeev, your recent book, Sustainable Sustainability, it focuses on this concept of steward leadership, which is going to be the cornerstone of this podcast series. You and I have discussed this before, but what is steward leadership and how does it differ from traditional leadership models?
So, steward leadership, there are two words here, stewardship and leadership. People think of leadership as somebody up there with high authority, with the highest title, with the highest position, telling other people what to do. That's an old-fashioned notion of leadership. Today, we are faced with challenges like climate change, socioeconomic inequality, and cyber vulnerability, which if we don't solve, there will be no humanity left in less than 20 years. No planet left, no people left. So we need everybody to see themselves as a steward of planet Earth and humanity, not sacrifice. Go with whatever you want to achieve. Whether you are a business leader, you want to make maximum money, or you're a societal leader, you want to have maximum influence and make positive change. Either which way, you have dreams, you have aspirations, go with your aspirations. Yeah. But please get that fame and fortune by addressing the very challenges that are addressing humanity. Steward leaders believe that the more I give, the more I receive. Not that they are not ambitious. Even Mother Teresa was very ambitious. But she believed that the more I give to society, the more I will receive. So that's the idea behind steward leadership. In business, it boils down to finding profitable solutions to environmental and social challenges. In social leaders, and no better than Dr. Bedi here, it is, yes, I want to be influential, but I want to be influential, I have to give to society what society needs, and I'm prepared to do that my entire life.
Yeah. Kiran, you have done just that. Everything that Rajeev has been talking about, your entire career has been about maximizing your talent, your skill set, but for the greater social good. Let's start at the beginning. Where did that come from? Where did this sense of social purpose come from?
I set up a foundation, one of the first public servant who set up a foundation nearly 36 years ago. While in services, there was no concept of corporate social responsibility at that time. What did I see? You see, I was a public servant, employed full-time, 24/7, a police officer, who literally had no time even to be home to get a good sleep. Yet, because I was always on the move as a officer, I used to see which had a direct bearing on my crime prevention. My purpose of policing was first prevent crime alongside detect crime. And detect to prevent again. Normally, we are all awarded for detection of crime. I wanted to reward myself prevention of crime because I was a strong believer in prevention. So when I used to be walking the streets, patrolling, I found a cluster of slums which were breeding crime. And no cops would dare to go into it because there were a lot of women who would attack the men and say, how dare you come? Where are the women? And there were no women cops. So as a woman, I stewarded that group and I said, okay, men, follow me. I'll take you to the vulnerable areas to find out because they were breeding crime. And when I saw, what did I see? Children out of school, women selling drugs to earn a livelihood and run their homes. So that was a breeding ground for crime, which was feeding my entire area. So I said, while I'm firefighting outside, here's a breeder. Why don't I do something with the breeder? But the breeder was not a politically attractive constituency because all of them were migrants. And they were all crime, but they were not voters. So the politicians had their hands off them, saying, they're not our problem, they're not our voters, this is not our constituency. But they were my constituency as a police officer because they were breeding crime. I was not for votes, I was for prevention. My purpose of policing was to provide safety and security and connect people to the policing.
Which is wonderful, but to Rajeev's point, this idea of you have a job, you have KPIs you have to tick, but at the other point is you want to merge the two and have this greater social purpose. How did you bring the two together?
That's what I exactly did. Yeah. I opened schools for them. I was coming to that. So I had to set up a foundation and I didn't have the money. But what did I have? I had influence. I had power. I had position, right? And I had teams. So I had teams. So we started to, when I set up this foundation, set up schools, etc., I didn't have the money. I connected the business, profit-making businesses who were also victims of their crimes. So what did I do? I linked my position. I used my power of position to do good, and I achieved my purpose. See, it was a win-win.
Yeah.
I won crime prevention. People found schooling. Other women found economic development. Business found better security. Their profits increased. Everybody was a win-win. And that's got sustained.
Yes.
My foundation is still on 40 years now.
This is exactly what you're talking about, Rajeev. A sense of moral purpose, but also satisfying all the criteria needed in that workplace. You and I have talked about this before. What are some of the other standout examples that you have in your book or in your business? This idea of merging profit with a greater social purpose.
You know, this idea of merging profit with purpose, or rather profit with purpose, is not a new idea. There are people who get it and there are people who don't. Long before, so one of the examples that I talk about quite a bit in my book is Faber-Castell, the German pencil maker. Now, in the 1800s, Lothar von Faber, who was the fourth generation family member who was running the business, right? He introduced things like employee benefits like housing, education, etc., and health insurance a full 40 years before such things became the norm in Germany. In fact, what they did paved the way for becoming labor laws in Germany later on. Right? Fast forward, just 100 years, about 155 years ago, Jamshedji Tata in India was building his first steel plant. In a very rural part of India, it was called a village called Sakchi at that time, today called Jamshedpur. Before the steel plant was up, he built avenues, he built roads, he built temples, he built mosques, he built schools, he built community parks, he built hockey playing fields, etc., hospitals. Why? Not because he was giving away money for charity, but he realized that, I want engineers and family members to come here and live here to run the steel plant. Nobody's going to come here if I don't build a whole township. So the idea of environmental and social sustainability is not new. The idea that the more business does for society, the more they're going to succeed, and the more individuals do for society, the more they are going to succeed, is an old idea. Dr. Bedi knew this a long time ago. Jamshedji Tata knew it 155 years ago. Lothar von Faber knew it 200 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's this misunderstanding here that there is a conflict between purpose and profit.
Yeah.
By profit, I mean, for an individual, I want to be famous, I want to be influential, and for business, I want to make money. There's no conflict if you don't want it to be.
Yeah. And Dr. Bedi, there is no greater example of what Rajeev is talking about than your extraordinary work as Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry. You saw the social problems. You saw the greater need to not only fix those problems, but the long-term sustainable benefits of fixing those problems. For the benefit of our listeners across Asia, put us in your mindset. You take over this job as Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry as a woman. So you've already got that patriarchal challenge to deal with. What did you see that needed fixing, and how did you do it?
I'll give you one of the example of the many to drive home, to be focused on. Pondicherry was going dry. It had running out of water, and it's a seaside. It's a seashore, she's on the seashore, and membranes below of the whatever you call them. What do you call them? The membranes of the soft water, the potable water, they were being punctured by the seawater. Salt water was entering the membranes of the aquifers below. And now people had started to get salty water in the taps. And people came to me saying, ma'am, we are buying mineral water to even cook our food. Forget about bathing, etc. Cooking our food, we have to buy expensive water, and they were poor. I felt ashamed of seeing this situation, that while I'm bathing in an RO water at the Lieutenant Governor's office, here they're buying mineral water, poor, to even cook their own food. Forget about look at the kind of water otherwise they would be bathing in. Hard water, which will probably take your hair off. And I asked them, I said, where are the solutions? They said, ma'am, the groundwater has disappeared. I said, why is the groundwater disappeared? Now, I need to ask, because I'm an outsider who's coming to administer, to understand. I said, show me the problem. Best is, for a leader, show me the problem. So they took me, and I went, and I was always basically on the ground. So when they showed me the problem, I saw the solution. But the solution also meant somebody who was making profits, somebody like these pharmaceuticals, etc., were making profits by taking out water from the irrigation canals. And they were sucking out water to make their oxygen, pharmaceuticals, whirlpools, etc. of the day. Good profits. So I said, well, they are taking away common man's irrigation canals, means they sink, let water permeate down below. That's when the wells and the taps start working. See, water was getting dried up by use for profit. What community property was being used for profit. So that oxygen plant was right across. I walked to that oxygen plant. I said, you are using this community property? Yes. Are you making profits? I'm so happy you're making profits. But what do you do with the community? You are making, this is using. What do you do in return? You continue to make, I'm not blocking you. Look, I as a governor could have blocked. I did not, because I want them to make profit, because they making oxygen, which is a life-saving thing. So I said, you continue make profits, but you don't take away the livelihood of the people to whom this property also belongs. So what do you do? They said, what can we do? I said, I don't want money. You have hardware, you have JCBs, you hire JCBs. Immediately use these to clean up these irrigation canals, and so that when the water, Pondicherry is water fed. I said, when the water comes in, otherwise it overflows because it's all, what is it called? A lot of forested thing, because it had never been de-weeded. So the irrigations were choked with vegetation. Irrigation canals could not take rainwater over the years in Puducherry because government never had the money to de-weed them, de-seed them, de-weed them. So I said, look, you continue to take water, you de-seed them and clear up the vegetation so that when the rains come in October, November, these irrigation canals can retain all the rainwater, and when the rainwater seeps in groundwater will improve, wells and tube wells and taps will start running good water. So no money, their profit. They use their profit to hire the machinery to clean up the irrigation canals so that when the rains came in October, November, the irrigation, and there were miles of them when I found this way. I never got involved into any money. Government did not get. They, from their profits, spent it to get water back. To get water. So it was feeding situation. And lo and behold, October and November rains came. Plenty of rains came. This is a season when the Pondicherry gets the rain, the northeast monsoon. And now there was no flooding because now the irrigation canals could take the water. No flooding. Water went into the irrigation canals and people's water taps start to run. Do you know when I left Pondicherry, where it was dipping, I left it 7 meters high at the water table, all because I connected profit with purpose. That was profit, this is purpose, and people were joyous. And now, do you know, I'm a legacy only for water management, mostly for water management in Puducherry, because I involved now not one, I involved all of them who were nearer irrigation canal using my water. I said, now you people are people, you have to work with people together so that people are also happy and you are their consumers. You are the providers, work together. And that's what happened. And thereafter, people took over sustainability. People took over to make sure that the company does not disappear in continuing to make a contribution. Nobody lost. On the contrary, their water table, even for the oxygens and pharmaceuticals and whirlpools, increased because they now generated. Earlier, they were only consuming. Now they were contributing. Now they were collaborating. And that's what happened. So I'm just trying to give you one example. The steward leadership is go to the site. First of all, remain accessible to what is happening. Keep your ears and eyes open. Remain sensitive. When the people tell you, don't ask for a report. Don't say, okay, we go. Show me the problem. Show me the problem. And go to the problem and find a local, low-cost solution which makes profits possible and which meets a purpose possible.
This is extraordinary. Rajeev, this is encapsulated everything that your book is about.
We've been and all the stuff that we're writing and all the stuff that we're talking about. But, I want to ask you a question. I remember when those irrigation canals started flowing again, I visited you at what is called the Raj Bhavan, which is the governor's official residence. It's like a palace where she was. And you used to do these things called the 6 a.m. rounds.
Yes.
And I came with you to a couple of those. Can you tell us what were those six? Before you tell us what the 6 a.m. rounds were, the governor's position in India is a figurehead position. The power and the administration lies with the chief minister. Your job was supposed to have cocktail parties and visits and entertain state guests. Instead, you changed the governor's palace into a public place and you started these 6 a.m. rounds. What was that all about?
6 a.m. rounds were my weekend rounds, which now where the offices are closed, for people are a little relaxed. So every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I would bike along with my team. So I would go cycling because that's when you see the problem. You don't see the problem sitting in a Mercedes and whiz past. You see the problem when you bike. And since I'm a fitness freak as well, so I found this another wonderful entertainment adventure. So we used to have our team collectively go 6 a.m. weekend rounds to the problems of the week. And that's where we were biking to where it was a team of, I was not alone. I was into a lovely cavalcade. It was like a cavalcade of bikes. Sometimes the youth will join in, sometimes the residents will join in. So we used to have fun, but we will go to a cause, to the problem identified during the week. Lieutenant Governor's office is what the lieutenant governor makes it. Every public servant's job could be a figurehead job, could be a rule-bound job, could be a bureaucratic job, could be a social activism job. It's up to you. It's the way you apply the law and the rules and the budgets. And if you're honest to the core, sensitive to the core, empathetic to the core, field-oriented to the core, willing to be visible to the core, collaborative to the core, you can transform from every position of the government today, anywhere in the world.
This is the fascinating point, Rajeev, because Dr. Bedi, very hands-on, as you can see, the 6 a.m. calls, cycling, seeing the real problems. But listening to you, it does seem like it needs a collaborative effort, though, because despite your wonderful efforts, steward leadership, it can't really be done in a silo, can it? You need everybody on side with you.
Absolutely. So there are 4 core ideas behind steward leadership, right? One is interdependence, which is the belief that the more I give, the more I will receive. And that's what you're hearing in this story. Yes, I also want to be successful, but I can only be successful by making my people do better. The second is long-term view. This is not about winning the sprint. This is about the marathon. You have to think in generations, not in quarters, like most businesses do. The third is ownership mentality, and that's the choice that she made, which is, yes, my position, my office is a figurehead position traditionally, but I choose differently. I choose to make it something very, very different because I am a steward of the people who have put me here. And finally, creative resilience, which is the way to find answers is not by regulation and dictate. The way to find answers is collaborative collaboration. And this is where, the companies that were drawing the water to produce their products, the community, the governor's office, the civil services, everybody was brought together to bear on the problem. And so that was classic steward leadership. So the 4 things, if you are a steward leader, you have to believe in interdependence. The more I give, the more I receive. You have to take a long-term view. You have to take ownership and choose to be a steward leader. And you have to believe in creative resilience, which is innovation, innovation, innovation.
Yeah.
Because everybody is short of resources. No matter how much money and how much power you have, everybody is short of resources. And only creative resilience, there are people who say, I don't have the resources. I don't have the power. And there are people who say, I will find a way. That's steward leadership.
Nowhere are you going to hear that phrase, we don't have the resources, more than in the prison system. I mean, your Tihar prison extraordinary story is a case study that almost encapsulates everything Rajeev has said about steward leadership. Just to give some context, so you take over this prison, Tihar prison. It's not only one of the biggest prison complexes in India, it's one of the biggest in Asia.
Yeah.
Paint a picture for our listeners. What did you inherit? What were the problems that you saw? And how did steward leadership help you solve them?
I literally inherited mounds of garbage.
That's one way of putting it.
Literally inherited mounds of garbage. You might ask me, I had 10,000 people living inside with the garbage. 10,000 people living unhealthily with that garbage. Where did the garbage come from? Well, from the vegetable waste 10,000 people eat every day. And it was being dumped in some corners of the prison. And when I walked the prison again, when I started to walk the prison, I used to stink. It used to stink. And I said, I have to walk, but I can't walk this with the stink. And they said, why is the stink? There's garbage. I said, why is there garbage? Because the municipalities refused to remove the garbage. I said, why? Because we didn't have the money to pay the municipal services to remove the garbage. So I said, why didn't you have the money? Because we ran out of money. So you ran out of money, and that's why it's mounting. So I said, so what do? How do I generate money? I can't print money, and I can't tell the government to immediately release money. I did a press statement. I made an appeal. I said, friends, anybody who has a solution to this mounds of garbage, I need help.
So no ego. You're willing just to put it out there. I don't have all the answers.
I don't have the answers. But I'm not helpless. I can help you, provided you come with a solution. So I said, because I alone can make you enter the prison. So I will facilitate your entry, and if you have the solution. So you come, I facilitate, you come with the solution. I give you the credit, because now I let them know who did it. So, do you know the next day I got a call from Gujarat, a very good philanthropist, but a very wealthy man. He says, Kiran bhai, can I come? I'm in Bombay. I said, please come. So he came. He said, I have the solution. Come. He He says, take me to the sites. He came to Delhi, flew in on his own. Take me to the garbage site. He says, I have a solution. We can start work right away. And he had something to turn the garbage into. He said, just get the heaps made at separately heaps. So he gave me the technique. He brought the solution and we converted the garbage into manure. And we started to sell the manure and make money for welfare funds. And the stink disappeared. And it because of skill development for many, many prisoners. Because now they realize garbage is everywhere. I can convert it into a skill development. And many foreign prisoners, particularly who were coming from the poorer countries, learned that skill, saying we will go back and earn money out of garbage there. So everything that I didn't spend, he got his own credit. He's mentioned in my book, but the book was also mentions him because the due credit went to him. Thereafter, it picked up momentum. So, we can do this. It was also industries called Excel Industries, which came with the solution. See, I'm mentioning it was Excel Industries, a grand old man who came with it. This is it. I'm only giving you one. Yeah. There are many. But this is one. I inherited garbage. First thing we addressed was to make the prison environment healthy for these 10,000 people to live. Otherwise, how would I deal with the unhealthy? I don't have medical budgets either.
Brilliant. I mean, Rajeev, a cynic listening to this might say, yes, this is the perfect example, a microcosm almost of what you're trying to achieve. But it's a prison or a hospital or a school. In other words, it's public sector, public services. It's literally in their interests to improve for the greater social good. How do you apply those principles to a hard-nosed private sector where the bottom line is literally all about profit? How does it go across to the private sector?
So let me address the first part of your question, your comment first. That these are civil servants, these are social sector leaders. It's in their interest to do good. Now, 14 years ago, I gave up the corporate sector and came to the non-profit sector because I wanted to do greater good. Right now, I thought I was going to hang out with very nice people, very kind people, people with no ego, people who are service oriented because I want to spend the rest of my life with such people. You know what I found in the non-profit sector? Egos bigger than elephants.
I'm finding it myself in the charity sector.
Exactly.
Yes.
They play God. Just because they have the power to do something for greater good, they start playing God and their egos are bigger than even the private sector. So I'm sorry, there is a lot that needs to be done in the social sector in terms of teaching them about life, humanity, leadership, and happiness, because power alone is not happiness. And another time on that. So that's the first part. Coming back to the for-profit sector. Like I was saying, you have a choice. You can look at environmental and social sustainability as a cost problem, as a compliance problem, or a risk issue. And therefore, you can choose whether I want to be just a window dresser or a box checker or even a greenwasher. Or you can see opportunity in there and say, no, this is an opportunity for me to leave a positive legacy and to make money. Because if the World Economic Forum data is to be believed, just climate change alone provides $10.1 trillion of annual new business opportunities for the next 20 years and 395 million jobs by 2030. So you see it as a cost issue or a risk issue or a compliance issue, you will always say, oh my God, another burden on me. My God, what do I do? Blah, blah, blah. It's eating into my profits. And you make excuses that we are not doing well because of this, because the government is imposing all kinds of new rules and regs on us. Or you say, no, I'm going to use this as an opportunity. You just heard an amazing story of garbage and human waste being converted into manure in a profitable way. So the first step is intentionality and choice. Right. I'm going to quote Dr. Bedi here because we had a conversation a long time ago, and she said something like, I don't know if you remember this, you said something like, I asked you, what sacrifices did you have to make to give to the world what you've done? No. You remember what you said?
Yeah.
You want to say it?
I make choices. I don't make sacrifices.
That's what she said. I don't. She literally wagged a finger at me and said, let me be very clear about one thing, Rajeev. I made no sacrifices. I only made choices. My family got as much of me as I wanted, as I think was necessary, but my priority was to serve the country. I made the choice and I don't regret it.
Which is wonderful. But let me bring in another issue, the gender issue, because I often hear calls for social change on my radio show from C-suite leaders, from CEOs, business leaders. They more often than not happen to be men. Not always, but they are. You're an exception. You've done it in sports. You've done it in the public sector, in the private sector. You've done it in politics. You have broken down so many male-dominated barriers. If someone like my daughter is listening, and she will listen to this, what would you say to that generation of young women coming through? How do they follow in your footsteps?
Begin early. Begin equally. Do all the boys what the boys do. Why are they different? They play, they're outdoor, they're moving, they fight, they win, they lose, they fall, they get up. They do all adventurous things. Get into adventure and mobility. Prepare early, not later. Girl, you prepare early, boy. So they don't prepare to cook, prepare to create food. See, so therefore, if girls start early, what is my background? There's a lot of sports every day, a lot of education every day, a lot of skills every day, a lot of adventure every day, a lot of competition anyway, losing and winning every day. Learn to lose early rather than cry later. So I learned to lose, I win, I took care of my own rights, assert my own rights, assert my positions everywhere. So be like the boys. But on the contrary, let the boys learn lessons from the girls of humility, of compassion, empathy, and love and care. But boys it's a muscle. They're going for muscle and money as girls. So muscle and money to provide mobility later. Then you're equal.
Brilliant.
Before we, I know we're running out of time. I have a question for you.
Sure.
When we spoke last time, you said a lot of people have come to your show and you talked to a lot of business leaders, a lot of societal leaders.
Yep.
And there's a lot of excuses about why they are helpless about not being able to address environmental and social sustainability. Why do you think we're not making progress? Despite $40 trillion in ESG assets, despite hundreds of regulations, despite incentives, measurement and reporting requirements, why are we not making progress?
We saw a Singaporean leader, diplomat this week, who I will not name, but he said on a very lengthy Facebook post that climate change is not even an issue at the moment. It's fallen off the political agenda completely. He was referring more specifically to the US elections, and it isn't. It is not on the agenda at all for Democrats or Republicans right now. My gut feel is, number one, it is bottom line profit. Number two is, if you're talking about lower down the social economic ladder, people vote and think and behave with their wallets. That hasn't changed. That's why I think you were so great when you came on our show. That's why I think what you're doing is so fabulous. If we can encourage more people, male, female, upper class, middle class, working class, to realize that it's in their financial interests, then you'll see change. I always say that COVID was a good example. Unless COVID is in your living room, people are not that bothered. Unless climate change is at your window, unless they can see the ocean coming towards them, it is human nature to worry about yourself, maybe your immediate family, but most of all, what's in your wallet. That's why I think your example with the water, with the prisons is so effective, because if you can demonstrate that we can do social good and benefit your wallet, particularly here in Singapore, that's how you make the breakthrough.
I couldn't agree more. Today in the evening, we're going to be releasing our third installment of what we call SL25, the Steward Leadership 25 list. This is a list of 25 best examples of profitable solutions for environmental social problems through Asia Pacific. And today's winners will be released at 6 p.m. tonight. And they are doing some phenomenal work. I'll just give you one example. This company is solving a problem of drinking water and safer cooking utensils in rural India. And by doing so, they are earning carbon credits. And they sell those carbon credits to make money and then pour it all back. So they're a for-profit company, but they're alleviating human pain and doing so profitably. And there are going to be 25 amazing examples. We got almost 200 nominations for this year. Each of those 200 are great stories. Unfortunately, we only award 25, along with INSEAD, along with WTW and the Straits Times, and that's going to happen this evening. So the point is, we have to educate people on the possibility. If you decide, the possibilities are endless. Don't be helpless. And that's the message I think we are hearing here. There was one woman in a time where India was heavily male-dominated, still is, but at that time, unheard of what was going on here. And if one woman can change the world, Similarly, like the Thai princess mother who, God rest her soul, the Golden Triangle was all full of prostitution and drugs. And today it's a haven. It's a hugely profitable community-owned business, which is global. Next month, I take a group of executives there for a study tour to show them what one woman's vision can do. And they have, it's a global business. They do business with IKEA. They do business with Muji. They do business with Italian designers. The same villagers were being beaten up every week with chains and forced into either prostitution or drugs. So it's possible. The first step is wake up. And that's what we're trying to do in this podcast, as well as through everything that we do.
Well, that ties in very nicely to my final question for both of you. Your career, Dr. Bedi, is extraordinary. The India Vision Foundation, the prisons, your first female officer. But I sometimes get a sense that, yes, you had a great career with real public purpose. But in today's world, in the age of the poly crisis, the existential crises seem almost too big for some people. What have we got? Climate change, too big. Political populism, too big. Ukraine, Middle East, the age of AI. It's almost too big for young people to comprehend. So bearing that in mind, what lessons would you want to pass on to them? What would be effective leadership today? What does it look like?
Strengthen yourself before you start thinking of strengthening others. Because if you're healthily weak, financially weak, how would you be? You will be dependent. So become self-reliant in every possible way so that you can be of value to the others. This is how you can. You cannot be a dependent person and then promoting. So I would say every man or a woman move towards self-reliance, which could be education, could be skills, could be resources, could be even willing to, even your thinking. If your thinking is of to share and give, I think you are able to be an asset. So grow up to be an asset to humanity, not a liability.
Beautifully put. Final word to you, Rajeev. You've laid out your template in a fantastic book, which I thoroughly recommend, Sustainable Sustainability. Maximize profit and social purpose for the greater good. But in Singapore and in Asia more generally, I can hear those cynics saying, it's easy for you to write. You don't have shareholders, or you don't have customers, or you don't have government leaders to deal with. Or if I turn it around the other way, you don't have fickle voters to deal with who are working with very short-termist interests, with very short-term election cycles. What would you say to those cynics to overcome that cynicism?
First of all, there is nobody on this planet who doesn't have resources, who doesn't have constraints, who doesn't have 100 excuses as to why something cannot be done, right? So steward leadership is a choice. Those who make the choice of steward leadership, and I can now give you hundreds of examples in politics, in business, in civil society, where people with all those constraints and more overturn that equation. Why? Because they wanted to. Because they said, I will not take no for an answer. That's the issue. You start, you take the first 2 steps, and then the remaining 98, the universe will make it possible. But you take the first 2 steps with good heart, and everything is possible. Point number 1. And the final thing I'll say is, you want to be a good leader. You want to have a rich life. There is a bedtime habit that I'd like to leave you with. Every individual, you want to have a really rich life, get into the habit of reflecting on 2 questions every night before bedtime. Question number 1, what did I give to the world today? Question number 2, what will I give to the world tomorrow? 5 minutes of reflection before you doze off, and you will have the richest life possible.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Perfect place to end it. Rajeev Peshawaria, CEO of the Stewardship Asia Centre and author of the outstanding book, Sustainable Sustainability. And what can I say? The inspirational Dr. Kiran Bedi, the founder of India Vision Foundation, just celebrated your 30th anniversary. Congratulations. Do check that out online. Former Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor talking to both of you today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And that's the end of our very first episode of the new podcast series, Steward Leadership, Maximum Purpose, Maximum Profit. Do look out for more episodes in the future. Thanks for listening.